Listen carefully, someone whispered in German, her voice barely audible over the low hum that rolled across the harbor. That is not the sound of war. The ship had stopped moving, but the vibration beneath their feet had not. It pulsed through the steel deck, steady, mechanical, alive in a way none of them had ever felt before. Anna Weiss stood among the line of women, her back straight, her hands still at her sides, the posture of discipline holding even as something unfamiliar pressed against her senses. They had been told what to expect. Chaos. Ruins. A nation stretched thin by war. But the air that met them as the hatch opened was thick with something else entirely, heat, yes, but also motion, industry, a constant rhythm that did not break. When they stepped onto the gangway, the first thing Anna noticed was the sky, clear, uninterrupted, no distant smoke, no dull haze of burning cities. Then the sound grew louder. Metal striking metal. Engines turning. A deep, layered chorus of movement that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She lowered her eyes and followed the line forward, boots meeting solid ground, and then she saw it. The dock stretched wide, far wider than any port she had known, lined with cranes that towered overhead like steel giants frozen mid-step. Their arms moved slowly, deliberately, lifting crates the size of small houses as if weight had lost its meaning. Tracks ran along the ground, carts rolling past in precise rhythm, each one loaded, each one moving with purpose. No shouting. No panic. Just coordination. Anna stopped without realizing it. The woman behind her nearly collided into her shoulder but said nothing. No one spoke. Even the guards, standing nearby in pressed uniforms, did not raise their voices. They watched, calm, as if this was ordinary. As if this was nothing. Somewhere to her left, a whistle blew, sharp, clean, and an entire line of workers shifted direction in unison, like a single organism responding to a quiet signal. Anna's breath caught, not from fear, but from something she could not yet name. This was not what she had prepared for. In Germany, factories had been targets. Broken. Silent. Here, they roared with life. A train passed in the distance, its cars linked in a line that seemed to stretch forever, each one filled, each one moving without delay. She followed it with her eyes until it disappeared behind a wall of stacked containers, taller than any building she had seen intact in months. Impossible, someone murmured behind her, the word slipping out before it could be contained. Anna did not turn. She kept looking forward. A man walked past her carrying a metal lunch pail, his pace unhurried, his expression neutral. He nodded once at a passing soldier, who nodded back. No tension. No hatred. Just acknowledgement. The vibration beneath the ground continued, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat too large to belong to any one place. Anna felt it through the soles of her boots, rising up into her chest. They had expected destruction. They had prepared for cruelty. Instead, they had stepped into something else entirely. Something controlled. Something vast. And for the first time since the war had begun, Anna realized she did not understand the world in front of her. They were told not to stare, but it was impossible not to. The line moved forward slowly, each step measured, controlled, yet every pair of eyes kept drifting back to the same impossible sight. Anna felt it again, that quiet resistance inside her, the part of her mind that tried to reject what she was seeing, to force it into something familiar, something explainable. But nothing fit. The machines did not stop. Not for a second. Not for their arrival, not for the presence of prisoners, not even for the heat that hung heavy in the air. It was late summer, the kind of American heat that pressed against the skin and stayed there, thick and unmoving, yet the workers continued as if the temperature did not matter. Men rolled up their sleeves, wiped their hands on cloth, and kept going. A woman stood on a platform above one of the conveyor lines, clipboard in hand, marking something down with calm precision. No one rushed. No one hesitated. It was a rhythm that had already decided what every person would do before they even moved. Anna tried to match it in her head, tried to find a command behind it, the voice giving orders, but there was none. Only signals. Only quiet understanding. Keep moving, a voice said in English, not harsh, not loud, just firm enough to be heard. Anna turned slightly and saw him for the first time. Captain Daniel Harper stood near the edge of the platform, his uniform clean despite the dust in the air, his posture relaxed in a way that did not match the authority he clearly held. He did not pace. He did not inspect with suspicion. He simply watched, his eyes moving across the line of women, then beyond them to the docks, then back again, as if everything belonged in the same frame. When one of the women ahead of Anna slowed, her steps faltering just slightly as she tried to take in too much at once, he did not raise his voice. He stepped forward, just one pace, and said, "Stay together." The words were simple. No threat. No urgency. Yet the line corrected itself immediately, as if the instruction had always been there, waiting. Anna felt something shift again, something quieter this time, more dangerous. Control without force. Order without fear. She had never seen it before. A cart rolled past them, close enough that she could see the contents clearly. Wooden crates, stamped and sealed, stacked with exact spacing, each one identical to the next. The wheels did not rattle. The metal beneath them did not shake. Everything moved as if it had been designed to remove friction from the world itself. Behind the cart, a young worker carried 2 metal cups filled with coffee, the steam rising in thin lines that disappeared into the heat. He handed one to another man without breaking stride. No words. Just a small nod. Anna watched the exchange longer than she should have. It was such a small thing. A cup of coffee. But it did not belong in the world she knew. Not here. Not now. Somewhere behind her, someone whispered again, softer this time, as if afraid the sound itself might break whatever this was. "They are not struggling," the voice said. Anna did not respond. She did not trust her voice to remain steady. Instead, she kept walking, step by step, her eyes forward, her mind trying to reconcile what could not be reconciled. The war had taught her to measure strength in destruction, in what could be taken, what could be broken. But this was something else entirely. Something built. Something maintained. And as the ground beneath her feet continued its steady vibration, Anna realized the most unsettling part was not the scale of it. It was how normal it all seemed to the people who lived inside it. The farther they moved from the dock, the clearer the pattern became, not louder, not more chaotic, but more precise, like stepping closer to the center of something carefully designed. Anna noticed the lines first. Painted markings on the ground, bright and unbroken, guiding movement without a single spoken command. Workers followed them instinctively, carts aligned perfectly within their boundaries, boots landing where they were meant to land, no hesitation, no confusion. It was not discipline in the way she understood it. There was no visible enforcement, no sharp correction, no fear pressing down from above. And yet nothing was out of place. A bell rang somewhere overhead, not harsh, not urgent, just a clean tone that cut through the mechanical hum. The response was immediate. Not rushed. Not frantic. Just a subtle shift. One group slowed. Another began moving. A door opened. A truck rolled forward exactly 10 feet and stopped without a sound. Anna felt her steps fall out of sync for a moment, her attention pulled too far outward, her mind trying to follow every movement at once. The woman beside her, Elise, brushed her sleeve lightly, a quiet reminder to stay present. Anna nodded once, barely, and returned her gaze forward, but the images stayed with her, layering over each other in a way that made her chest feel tight. She had seen factories before. She had worked in field hospitals supplied by them. But those places had always carried tension, urgency, the sense that everything could break at any moment. Here, nothing felt close to breaking. It felt sustained. As if the entire system existed not just to produce, but to endure. Captain Harper walked a few steps ahead now, his pace steady, his hands resting loosely behind his back. He did not look over his shoulder to check if they were following. He did not need to. The line stayed intact. Anna studied him for a moment, searching for something familiar in his posture, something that would anchor him in the world she understood. But there was no strain in his shoulders, no tightness in his jaw. He carried authority the way the workers carried their tasks. Naturally. Without effort. A gust of warm air moved through the corridor between buildings, carrying with it the scent of oil, steel, and something else, coffee again, faint but constant, like a thread running through the entire place. Ahead, a wide doorway opened into another section of the facility, larger than the last. The ceiling rose high above them, supported by beams that seemed to disappear into shadow. Light filtered down in long, clean lines, catching dust in the air but never obscuring the view. Machines stretched across the floor in organized rows, each one performing a single function, each one connected to the next in a chain that did not pause. Anna slowed again, just slightly, as her eyes moved across the scale of it. Not bigger. Not louder. Just more complete. A man stood at one of the stations, adjusting a dial with careful precision. He glanced up as the line of women passed, his eyes meeting Anna's for less than a second. There was no hostility in the look. No curiosity, even. Just acknowledgement, brief and neutral, before his attention returned to the machine in front of him. That, more than anything, unsettled her. They were not the center of this moment. They were not the interruption. The system did not bend around them. It continued, unchanged, as if their presence did not alter its purpose in the slightest. Anna felt something inside her give way, not completely, but enough to create a crack where certainty used to be. If this place could continue like this, without fear, without visible force, then everything she had believed about strength, about control, about what sustained a nation, might have been incomplete. She drew in a slow breath, the warm air filling her lungs, and for the first time, she did not try to reject the feeling. She let it sit there, unresolved, as the line carried her deeper into a world that did not need to prove its power. The noise should have overwhelmed them by now, but instead it settled into something steady, something predictable, like a rhythm the body could almost follow if it allowed itself to listen long enough. Anna noticed it in her breathing first, how it began to match the rise and fall of the machines around her, how the sharp edge of tension softened into something quieter, more focused. This was not chaos. It only looked like it from a distance. Up close, every movement had a place, every sound belonged to something specific, something necessary. A narrow walkway guided them between two long rows of equipment, the metal surfaces polished not for appearance but from constant use. A worker stepped aside just before their line reached him, not abruptly, not out of obligation, but with a simple shift of his weight that created space without interrupting his task. Anna watched his hands for a moment. Steady. Precise. No wasted motion. No hesitation. He did not look at them again. He did not need to. Ahead, one of the women faltered. It was subtle at first, just a slight misstep, her foot catching the edge of the painted line on the floor. The heat, the noise, the scale of everything pressing in at once. Her balance shifted, her body leaning just enough to break the line's perfect alignment. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. No shout. No command. Then a man from the nearest station reached out and caught her elbow before she could fall. The motion was immediate, almost automatic. He steadied her, waited until her footing returned, then released his grip without a word. He did not smile. He did not linger. He turned back to his station and continued working as if the moment had already passed. Anna felt it before she understood it. A pause. Not in the machines. Not in the movement. But inside her. The woman who had stumbled straightened, her face flushed, her eyes fixed forward again, but something in her posture had changed. Not weaker. Not smaller. Just, aware. Captain Harper had seen it. Of course he had. Anna did not know how she knew, but she could feel his attention shift for a brief moment, then settle again. He did not step in. He did not acknowledge the interruption. Because there was nothing to correct. Nothing to enforce. The system had absorbed it. The ground beneath them continued its quiet vibration, unchanged, steady as ever. Anna's gaze drifted to the man who had helped. He was already focused on his work, adjusting a lever, checking a gauge, his expression neutral, his movements consistent with everything around him. There was no sense of having done something noteworthy. No expectation of recognition. It had simply been the correct thing to do in that moment. Nothing more. That was what unsettled her most. In her world, actions were measured. Noted. Weighed against rules and consequences. Here, the action existed on its own, complete without explanation. She looked forward again, her steps falling back into rhythm with the line, but her thoughts no longer moved as easily. If kindness could exist like that, without instruction, without reward, then it was not weakness. It was structure. It was part of the system itself. A bell sounded again, softer this time, and a new section of the floor came into view ahead, even larger than the last, its scale stretching beyond what she could fully take in at once. The line did not slow. It did not hesitate. And neither did she. But as Anna moved forward, she carried something with her that had not been there before. Not fear. Not confusion. Something quieter. A question forming without words, growing stronger with each step into a world that did not need to raise its voice to be understood. They entered the next section without announcement, but the difference was immediate. The space opened wider, the ceiling rising higher until the beams disappeared into a haze of light and distance, and the machines here moved with a slower, heavier rhythm, each motion deliberate, each sound deeper, more grounded. Anna felt it in her chest before she understood it, the way the vibration shifted from a surface hum into something that carried weight, something that suggested not just movement, but force contained and directed. Large steel components moved along reinforced tracks, guided into place with exact alignment, not a fraction of an inch off. Men stood beside them, not straining, not pushing, but guiding with small adjustments, their hands resting lightly on controls that seemed almost too simple for the scale of what they commanded. No wasted energy. No visible struggle. It was not strength in the way she had been taught to recognize it. It was something quieter. Something controlled. Anna slowed again, her eyes following a massive piece of machinery as it descended into position, stopping at precisely the right moment, held in place as if the air itself had decided it would go no further. A man nearby checked a gauge, nodded once to himself, and moved on. No celebration. No acknowledgement. Just continuation. Behind her, someone exhaled sharply, the sound almost lost beneath the steady hum. They build like this every day, Elise whispered, her voice thinner now, not from fear, but from something closer to disbelief. Anna did not answer. She could not. Because the question forming inside her was no longer about what they were seeing. It was about what it meant. Captain Harper stepped to the side of the walkway and allowed the line to pass him for the first time. As Anna drew closer, she felt his presence not as pressure, but as a kind of stillness, a point around which everything else moved. He looked at each of them briefly, not inspecting, not judging, just seeing. When Anna passed him, their eyes met for less than a second. There was no challenge in his expression. No expectation. Only a calm awareness, as if he already understood something she was only beginning to question. She looked away first. Ahead, a break in the floor markings led toward a smaller area set apart from the main line of production. The machines here were quieter, more compact, their movements quicker but no less precise. A table stood near the edge, and on it rested several metal cups, steam rising in thin, steady lines. A worker picked one up, took a measured sip, then set it back down exactly where it had been. The cup did not slide. It did not rattle. Even rest had its place here. Anna felt the shift again, deeper this time, something settling beneath her thoughts, pressing against everything she had carried with her. Across the ocean. Power, she had been taught, was loud. It demanded attention. It proved itself through force. But this did not demand anything. It existed, complete, indifferent to whether it was seen or understood. A bell sounded once more, and the movement around them adjusted without hesitation, without confusion. The line continued forward, steady as ever, but Anna no longer felt like she was simply being led through it. She was moving inside it now, part of its rhythm, whether she wanted to be or not. And as she took another step, her mind returned to the same quiet question, clearer now, sharper, impossible to ignore. If this was how they built, then what else were they capable of, and why did none of it feel like a threat? The air changed again as they moved deeper, not in temperature, but in texture, as if the space itself had become more focused, more deliberate, every sound sharper, every movement more defined. Anna noticed the silence between the sounds now, the brief pauses where nothing collided, nothing overlapped, each action waiting its turn without hesitation. It was not emptiness. It was control. A narrow platform stretched ahead, elevated slightly above the main floor, giving a clear view of the operations below. Captain Harper guided the line onto it with a simple gesture of his hand, not pointing, not directing forcefully, just indicating a path that was already understood. Anna stepped onto the platform and felt the difference immediately. From here, the entire system revealed itself in layers. Lines feeding into lines. Movements connecting without interruption. Nothing wasted. Nothing delayed. Below, a series of engines sat aligned in perfect rows, their surfaces clean, their edges sharp, each one identical to the next down to the smallest detail. A technician moved along the row, checking each unit with a quiet efficiency, his hand brushing against the metal not as a test, but as confirmation. He did not stop long at any one point. He did not need to. Anna followed his movement until he disappeared behind a column of machinery, her eyes lingering where he had been, as if expecting something to change in his absence. Nothing did. The system held. That was when she understood something that unsettled her more than the scale, more than the order, more than the quiet confidence that filled the space. This did not depend on one person. Not on a single command. Not on constant supervision. It continued because it had been built to continue. Elise stepped closer to her, her voice low enough to disappear beneath the hum. In Germany, she said slowly, choosing each word with care, if one part stops, everything feels it. Anna kept her eyes forward. Here, Elise continued, almost to herself, it does not stop. Anna did not answer, but the truth of it settled in her chest with a weight she could not ignore. A bell sounded again, softer than before, and the technicians below shifted their pace almost imperceptibly, one step adjusting to meet another, the entire floor responding without confusion, without delay. No one looked around for direction. No one hesitated. It was as if the signal belonged to all of them at once. Captain Harper stood at the far end of the platform now, his figure still, his attention on the same wide view that held Anna in place. For a moment, he did not look like a man overseeing anything. He looked like someone observing something that had already proven itself. Anna stepped forward, drawn not by instruction, but by the need to understand. As she moved, a clipboard resting on a nearby stand caught her eye. Rows of numbers, clean and precise, each line marked with time, measurement, completion. No corrections scratched out. No uncertainty in the writing. Just record after record of something done exactly as intended. She did not touch it. She did not need to. The evidence was everywhere around her. A worker below paused for a fraction of a second, adjusting a component that had shifted slightly out of alignment. His hands moved quickly, correcting it before it could affect the next step, then he resumed without signaling anyone, without drawing attention. The line never slowed. Anna felt the question inside her sharpen again, no longer vague, no longer distant. If a system could function like this, without fear, without pressure forcing it forward, then what sustained? It was not control imposed from above. It was something else. Something shared. Something understood without being spoken. She looked out over the floor one more time, the steady movement, the quiet coordination, the absence of urgency that somehow produced constant motion. And for the first time, the thought came clearly, without resistance. This was not power that needed to be shown. This was power that had already been accepted. And that was why it did not have to raise its voice. The platform ended without a barrier, just a subtle shift in the floor markings that guided them down again, back into the movement below, as if the view from above had only been a momentary privilege, not a place they were meant to remain. Anna stepped down with the others, her boots meeting the ground in quiet rhythm, but something inside her no longer moved with the same certainty. The system around her had not changed. The machines continued. The workers continued. The signals came and went, each one absorbed without resistance. But her understanding of it had begun to fracture in ways she could not easily repair. She watched a group of workers pass a set of components between them, each movement timed without speech, each hand meeting the next at exactly the right moment. No one rushed. No one hesitated. It was not practiced in front of her. It was lived. A man wiped his hands on a cloth, glanced at a clock mounted high on a steel column, and adjusted his pace by a fraction, aligning himself with something unseen but clearly understood. Anna followed his gaze to the clock. The hands moved steadily, marking time that felt different here. Not counted in urgency. Not measured in survival. Just, kept. Elise walked beside her, quieter now than before, her earlier whispers replaced by a kind of still observation that needed no words. The line curved slightly, guiding them toward another corridor, narrower, more contained, where the sound softened just enough to allow smaller details to emerge. The scrape of a pen on paper. The click of a switch. The low murmur of voices that did not carry tension. Anna caught fragments of English, words she recognized but could not fully piece together in context. Numbers. Times. Instructions given without sharp edges. Nothing raised above what was necessary. Ahead, Captain Harper paused again, not to stop them, but to allow a cart to pass across their path. He did not step back. He did not signal urgency. He simply waited, his posture unchanged, his attention steady. The cart moved through, its wheels gliding over the floor without resistance, and only then did he continue. Anna noticed the distance he kept from them. Not too close. Not too far. Enough to lead without pressing. Enough to observe without intruding. It was a balance she had not seen before, and it unsettled her more than any command ever could. A door stood open at the end of the corridor, light spilling through from outside, brighter, less filtered, carrying with it a faint movement of air that broke the contained stillness of the interior. As they approached, Anna felt the shift again, the transition from one environment to another, but this time she was not bracing for impact. She was watching for understanding. Just before they reached the threshold, a voice behind her spoke, soft but clear, in careful English. "If they can do all of this," the woman said, her accent thick but her meaning precise, "why do they not act like they need to prove it?" Anna did not turn. She did not need to know who had asked. The question was already hers. It had been forming since the first step onto the dock, growing with each movement she could not explain, each moment that did not match what she had been taught. She stepped into the light without answering, because there was no answer yet. Only the steady realization that the strength she had been prepared to fear did not behave the way she expected it to. And that difference, quiet as it was, had begun to change everything she thought she understood. The light outside did not feel like relief. It felt like exposure. Anna stepped forward onto the concrete yard, the brightness sharper than anything inside, the sky stretching wide and uninterrupted above rows of structures that continued far beyond what she could fully take in. The air moved differently here, carrying the scent of metal and fuel, but also something cleaner, something open. Behind her, the steady rhythm of the machines continued, muted now by distance, but still present, like a pulse that did not fade. In front of her, the system did not end. It extended. Trucks moved along wide lanes marked with the same precise lines she had seen inside, their paths clear, their timing exact. Crates were lifted, transferred, secured, each motion part of the same continuous flow that had begun somewhere far beyond her view and would continue long after she left it. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see Captain Harper step into the light beside them. The brightness did not change his posture. He stood the same way he had inside, steady, composed, his attention moving across the yard not with urgency, but with quiet awareness. He removed his gloves slowly, one hand at a time, and slipped them into his pocket without looking down. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant, but Anna noticed it. Not because it mattered to the system, but because it did not need to. Around them, workers moved between buildings, some carrying tools, others pushing carts, each one following a path that seemed already decided. No one stopped to watch the line of women. No one stared. Their presence did not disrupt anything. A man paused near a stack of crates, adjusting a strap that had loosened slightly. He tested it once, nodded to himself, and moved on. No instruction. No correction from above. Just attention to detail that did not require recognition. Elise stepped closer again, her voice quieter than it had been inside. "It never stops," she said, not as a question this time, but as a realization. Anna kept her eyes forward, watching a crane in the distance lift a load slowly into place, the movement controlled, measured, ending exactly where it needed to end. "No," Anna said softly, her voice steady in a way she did not expect, "it does not need to stop." The word surprised her as much as anyone else. They had formed without effort, without resistance, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to exist. Captain Harper turned his head slightly at the sound, not fully toward her, just enough to acknowledge that something had been said. He did not respond. He did not question. He simply looked ahead again, his gaze settling on the same wide expanse of movement that filled the yard. Anna followed his line of sight, her eyes tracing the paths, the patterns, the consistency that tied everything together without force. The question that had been building inside her shifted again, not disappearing, but changing shape. It was no longer about why they did not prove their power. It was about why they did not need to. A truck passed in front of them, its engine low, its movement smooth, the driver focused on the path ahead without distraction. For a brief moment, the reflection in the side mirror caught Anna's face. She did not recognize the expression. Not fear. Not defiance. Something quieter. Something that had begun to listen instead of resist. The yard stretched on, the system continuing without pause, without strain, without the need to declare itself. And standing there in the open light, Anna realized the answer had been there from the beginning, not spoken, not explained, but present in every movement she had witnessed. Power that is real does not ask to be seen. It simply continues, steady and unchanged, until everything around it begins to understand. They did not move immediately. No one gave an order. No signal came to push them forward. The line of women simply stood there at the edge of the yard, suspended between what they had believed and what they had just seen, as if the space itself required a moment of stillness before anything could continue. Anna felt the weight of that pause settle into her shoulders, not as pressure, but as awareness. For the first time since stepping onto American soil, she was not trying to keep up. She was not trying to understand all at once. She was simply standing, letting the rhythm around her exist without forcing it into meaning. A breeze moved across the yard, light but steady, carrying the distant hum of engines and the faint scent of coffee again, always present, always subtle. Somewhere to her right, a group of workers gathered briefly near a loading platform, not in a formal line, not under supervision, but in a loose formation that suggested a shared break in time rather than a command. One of them opened a small metal container, passing something inside to the others. They spoke quietly, their voices low, their movements unhurried. Then, without any visible cue, they returned to their tasks, each one stepping back into the system as if they had never left it. Anna watched them longer than she intended. Not because of what they were doing, but because of how easily they moved between moments of work and moments of rest, without losing the rhythm, without breaking the flow. It was not discipline enforced from outside. It was something internal. Something chosen. Captain Harper stepped forward then, just one pace, enough to draw the line back into motion without a word. Anna followed, her step steady, her gaze no longer searching for contradiction, but observing with a kind of quiet acceptance she did not recognize in herself. They moved along the edge of the yard, past rows of materials stacked with exact spacing, past workers who acknowledged their presence with brief glances but no interruption, past machines that continued their work without pause or strain. Nothing demanded attention. Nothing asked to be admired. And yet everything held its place with a certainty that did not need explanation. As they reached the far end of the yard, a simple structure came into view, smaller than the buildings behind them, its doors open, its interior shaded and still. It did not carry the same weight as the factory floor. It did not vibrate with the same constant motion. It was quiet. Not empty, but intentionally so. Anna slowed slightly as she approached it, her mind returning, not to the scale of what she had seen, but to the moments in between. The hand that had steadied a falling woman. The cup of coffee passed without words. The man who adjusted a strap no one had told him to fix. Small things. Unrecorded. Unannounced. But present everywhere. She stepped inside the shaded space and felt the difference immediately, the noise softening, the air cooler, the movement outside continuing without her. For a brief moment, she stood apart from it, no longer inside the rhythm, but no longer resisting it either. Elise entered behind her, quiet, her expression changed in a way that did not need explanation. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say that would not reduce what they had witnessed into something smaller than it was. Anna looked down at her hands, still steady, still her own, but no longer holding the same certainty they had before. Then she lifted her gaze again, not toward the machines, not toward the workers, but toward the open doorway where light continued to spill in, unchanged, constant. She understood something now, not as a conclusion, but as a shift that could not be undone. They had been prepared for noise, for force, for something that would confirm what they had been told. Instead, they had found something quieter. Something that did not need to convince. She drew in a slow breath, the air filling her lungs without resistance, and let it out just as steadily. No one had raised their voice. No one had demanded belief. And yet, something inside her had moved. Not because it was forced. Because it was shown. And as she stood there, between the stillness inside and the motion beyond the door, the realization settled with a clarity that did not need words. She had not witnessed power being used. She had witnessed power being held. And that was why it could not be ignored.